Kenji is definitely one of the more interesting game designers to walk this earth. A high school dropout who went on to form Warp Inc., one of the main suppliers of weird and unusual games in the 90s, primarily developing games for the 3DO, D being the one that most people have heard of. An on-rails, full-motion video, horror-themed adventure game, laced with the most 90s CGI ever. I haven't played it myself, but I've heard very good things. They also made other slightly less popular but equally interesting games for the system, like Short Warp and Tripped, which is just Puyo Puyo with an evil tree. Unfortunately, the 3DO stopped being a thing for about a million reasons, one of which being that it was $700, which is almost $1,500 in today's money, and had like one launch title? So you can imagine how well that went. After the death of the 3DO, Kenji decided to say fuck Sony over some bullshit they pulled with D's PlayStation release and put all his chips on the Sega Saturn, which, might I add, is really fucking based. I love that man just for that. It might not have been the smartest decision to go with, but it's bold as hell and I support it. Warp's first game post Sony Disc and post 3DO happened to be their most innovative and unique game yet. A game I've owned a copy of for a whole decade and yet have never played it until now because I am a coward. Enemy Zero, Spooky Aliens in Space, the game. The year is 2062. Location: the Aki Space Station, somewhere in space making its way back to our beautiful blue planet. Now, I'm not gonna lie, but Enemy Zero is quite literally just Ridley Scott's Alien, which is not inherently a bad thing. I just think it borrows a little too much from the film. It still tweaks some things so that it's not exactly the same, word for word, bar for bar, but clearly wearing its influence on its sleeves, and pants, and shoes, and any other article of clothing. Instead of accidentally carrying a dangerous alien back onto the spaceship, in Enemy Zero, they purposely do it. And more than just one, there are 3, at the very least. I'm just lowballing it here. On board, a biological research team is escorting these alien life forms to be studied. Kimberly, David, George, Mercus, Ronnie, Parker, and last but not least, Laura, who is played by one of the world's first digital actresses, Laura. She also plays the main character in the D games, who is also named Laura. It's such a weird thing to think about. Like, video game characters, well, the voiced ones at least, are already being played by real people. But with this digital actor thrown into the mix, you then have Jill Cuniff, lead singer of Lucius Jackson, playing Laura, the digital actress who is playing Laura. Not Laura Harris from D, but Laura Lewis from Enemy Zero. I'm kinda glad digital actors didn't take off. I mean, why make things unnecessarily complicated for the sake of making things unnecessarily complicated? So Laura is Enemy Zero's protagonist. On the ride back to Earth, she is in a cryogenic sleep pod, snoozing all the way home. That is, until shit hits the fan. The aliens that the team has captured and contained decided to not be contained, and as a result are roaming around the ship freely, knocking the heads off all the crewmates for shits and giggles, I guess. Starting with Parker, who didn't even make it past the intro cutscene. And as if that was bad enough, these aliens also have a decent camouflage ability. By decent, I mean they are completely invisible to the naked eye. So, you know, it's kind of a big deal. With all the commotion, the Aki goes into emergency mode and wakes Laura up from her peaceful yet cold slumber, forcing the poor woman to go out there and do whatever it takes to save the other crewmates and make sure they all get back home. Laura is Okay, I guess. It doesn't seem like she remembers much from before cryogenic sleep, but it's not like she would have said that herself. Despite having a voice actor, she doesn't talk throughout the game, mostly communicating with caveman grunts, pure rage, and tears, not unlike a toddler. For a character who doesn't say anything, she can be quite expressive. It's not difficult to understand what she's thinking in most cases. All the other characters are fully voiced, and the performances range from, "Wow, that's actually pretty good for a game from the 90s, to, "Oh my god, why does he sound like that?" Kimberly's voice actor really stole the show here. She is without a doubt my favorite character in the entire game. All of the others could get hit by a bus and I wouldn't bat an eye. I just don't think they got enough screen time for me to actually become invested in them, to be honest. You only get to meet less than half of them in person, and even then only for moments at a time. With murderous creatures roaming about, you don't really have time to sit down and chit-chat about life and things. Unless you're Kim, of course. So you may be wondering, how the hell am I supposed to fight what I can't see? And that is an excellent question. You see, Laura has an earpiece called a VPS. What it does is alert Laura and the player whenever there's an enemy around by making the most obnoxious beeping noise known to man. Now, this can be a little difficult to get the hang of, but luckily the game provides a training mode to ease you in. Starting with you being able to see the enemy's location on a minimap and in person, represented by a cute little polygonal sphere. A floating death orb, if you will. The VPS will begin to beep whenever you are close to an enemy, with the beep rate going up as the enemy gets closer to you. It'll also beep at different pitches to let you know the general direction it is in. High-pitch beeps and boops means it's in front of you, low-pitch beeps and boops means it's behind you, and medium-pitch beeps and boops means it's either to the right or left. As you prove yourself a successful hunter in the training mode, the game will slowly start taking away your handicaps until you get to an experience that is identical to what the real deal is like. And when it gets to that point, shit starts getting stressful. You'll find yourself going up against multiple enemies at a time, and while it is easy to pinpoint where just one enemy is with the VPS, when there are 3 around you, each one with their own beeps, it can get pretty hard to not accidentally run into one. And when you inevitably do run into one, you're never really well equipped to handle it. The guns you can get are the most inconvenient pieces of shit in any video game. They all must be charged up before shooting. So while you're trying to figure out how close you are to an enemy, you also have to be thinking about how early you should start charging your space blicky. For every shot you miss, and you will miss, you drain the gun's battery until you can't shoot anymore. And you won't know it's completely drained until you try shooting it and then wonder why the hell it's not doing what it's supposed to. At which point you will have to swiftly hightail out of there because you will be literally right in front of the enemy, as that is the only distance the guns can reach. It's super scary when you start to realize how close you really have to be to kill them. Whenever you do take one of them down, their camouflage briefly deactivates, revealing that you were only inches away from death, and it makes missing a shot all the more frightening. Will you have enough time to charge your gun up and try again, or should you just turn and run to a safer area? It's really stressful when everything Laura does is at a snail's pace. When you're not in the death-filled corridors of the ominous Aki, you will be navigating through rooms via on-rails exploration, getting more of an adventure game vibe, giving you a break from the more edge-of-your-seat first-person shooter shit going on outside the room. These parts are where you'll get all the story bits and solve puzzles the game has in store for you. The puzzles are alright. It's just what you would expect from a survival horror game. Mostly password type stuff where the answer is probably lying around somewhere for you to look at, or some item-related puzzles. There's one where you have to use someone's ripped off fingers to get into a locked closet, where you find a gun that you can use to kill the aliens. It's pretty gross. There's nothing super difficult or brain heavy like Silent Hill, but it sure beats just walking around these rooms doing nothing besides watching cutscenes and saving your game. Speaking of saving, that's another interesting aspect about this game. So we all know how Resident Evil, or classic Resident Evil, limits how many times the player can save via ink ribbon items, making the game a little more stressful, but in a good way. It's fun, it works, it's not too constricting. For most players, you won't even need to save as many times as they allow. Enemy Zero has its own spin on it. Laura carries around a voice recorder with which she can save her progress by talking into it Dale Cooper style. This uses the voice recorder's battery, 3% of the battery to be precise. You start with 64% on normal mode, so you think to yourself, oh, okay, 21 saves for a 3-hour game is more than enough. Until you die. And you realize that loading takes battery too because Laura feels the need to listen to what she recorded, which does serve as a nice last time on Dragon Ball Z reminder of what's going on in the story. But babe, I got a game over 2 seconds ago. I haven't gone anywhere. I know what happened. Stop wasting my battery. Now, I don't know if I'm just hot garbage at the game. That could totally be a thing because I suck at a lot of games, but I do know for a fact that Kenji Eno purposely made this game difficult as hell. So I found myself using up most of my battery, not by saving a lot, but by dying non-stop throughout the whole game. Towards the end, I was afraid that I was going to run out of battery and my save would be wiped from the game. That would have been so devastating that this video would never have seen the light of day, because I would be damned if I sat there and played through the entire game again just to finish it. Enemy Zero, gameplay-wise, has to be one of the most frustrating and tedious experiences I've had in a game. I kinda don't want to say it, but close to Tulip's level of tedium if I'm being completely honest with you right now. But also like Tulip, it has a lot of redeeming qualities when it comes to the aesthetics that more or less make up for it. Enemy Zero really does this whole you are alone thing right. Sure, there are many times where you will come in contact with another character on the ship, but immediately after you are back on your own again, making your way through the endless halls of the space station, with nothing but the sound of your footsteps against the metal grated floors, hoping that your VPS doesn't start beeping, notifying you that a big nasty is nearby. The Aki feels cold and empty. Way too empty for such a large ship. A large ship with such a ridiculous floor layout. You have simple floors with a bunch of rooms connected with short hallways, and then you have labyrinths connecting an elevator to a single room. It's really silly when you think about it. Of course, I know that it's a video game and it serves its purpose by not only being a battleground for the player to fend off against the aliens, but also to make navigation a bit more hands-on, because for some of these areas you really need to map the layout yourself if you ever hope to get through it. But it's just fucking hilarious to imagine a space station layout being this anti-crew. The engineers really wanted to fuck over whoever was gonna be on it. I will admit, as annoying as these mazes can sometimes be, they really add to the horror, especially when enemies are involved. When it seems like there's an enemy right next to you, that could be the case, or maybe they're on an entirely sectioned off area of the floor, making them farther away than they actually seem. Your VPS will play tricks on your mind. There have been many times where I was paralyzed with fear due to the excessive beeping playing in my ears, just waiting for the nearby enemy to make its way over to me so that I could kill it, only to realize after minutes of waiting that they were in a completely different room, but still close enough to set off the VPS. It's stupid and a waste of my time, but it's pretty effective at scaring my socks off. Of course, I have a second pair underneath that stay on because I'm not showing the dogs for free. But seriously, this game does have an excellent atmosphere. The sound design is great, the music when it's actually playing is chilling, and the Aki's endless mazes are just horrifying because I can never figure out where the hell I'm supposed to go. But even though the game is frustrating as hell to play, by no means does that make it any less spooky than it is. Okay, so I want to talk about more stuff, namely the different vibes the 3 discs all have, along with some other things pertaining to the story and the last stretch of the game. If for some reason you would want to play Enemy Zero for yourself, which I don't really recommend, feel free to skip to the end of the video where I poorly compile my thoughts on the game. If you don't care about being spoiled and want to hear more of my sexy voice, then continue watching. So Enemy Zero, whether you play the Sega Saturn version or the superior PC version that doesn't cost $200, comes with 4 discs in total. Disc 0 contains all of the bonus stuff, like the opening cutscene, which is an 8-ish minute long prologue detailing the shit hitting the fan before Laura wakes up, the aliens breaking out, and Parker dying among other things. There's also the much needed training mode and a neat little get to know the Warp staff video thingy. It's a really nice watch. It's kind of just cool pictures of the Warp team spliced together with footage from their previous games. You can tell that they had fun with these photo shoots. It's also got a nice track to go with it. It's pretty dope. Moving on though. Disc 1 actually has the game on it. Like I mentioned earlier, it starts with Laura waking up from cryogenic sleep and then wandering around the ship to figure out what's going on. Sort of a calm before the storm. You do get a glimpse of Parker's dead body when you FaceTime him, but you know, other than that, everything's going quite well. We are alive and well, clear skin, still blonde. I don't know why that last one would change. Actually, you know what? In my headcanon, Laura is not a natural blonde, but is just a brunette in disguise. So she's very thankful for cryogenic sleep for preventing her roots from popping out and stabbing her in the back during these difficult times at space camp. What was I talking about? You have Ronnie who walks you through what you need to do, hand-holding even. His camera doesn't work for some reason, but I guess being able to hear his instruction is all that matters. It's pretty chill. You spend most of the time safely restoring power to the elevator so that you can travel to the other floors, brute forcing puzzles that probably have solutions somewhere else, but you're too lazy to look for it. Getting mad at doors that won't open, you know, just Laura things. Eventually you do come across some aliens, but they're pretty easily avoidable, and since you don't have access to a gun yet, that's a good thing. You do witness what these bastards can do though. Firsthand, you see what remains of Parker after an enemy encounter. One even took Mercus's head clean off along with his fingies. Shit's crazy. They don't even eat the bodies either, so like, what's their deal? Are they fucking space dolphins? Killers that are as ruthless as they are evil. That's my theory. Anyway, you do eventually find a gun with which you will kill your first enemy. It's chilling in a single hallway, right in front of you, so you can't fuck it up. If I could do it, anyone can. But now that you feel well armed and protected, the elevator's working, and everything is going smoothly, the worst thing that could happen happens and you drop your fucking gun. As soon as you get it, of course. Your only means of protection, gone forever. Or maybe just a couple of minutes. As you're running away, you come across a dead end and hear a familiar voice.
Laura, can you hear me? It's Kimberly. I'm watching you through the surveillance camera. The ceiling duct should be open. Climb through it and get out of there.
And then you spend the little time you have left trying to figure out how the hell you're supposed to do that. Until it's too late. Apparently, there's a button to look around freely, and it is only used in this one instance. You have to stare directly at the ceiling duct for Laura to decide to escape through it. After your not so smooth escape, the reality of the game slaps you in the face. There's no more hand holding, no more lining up enemies for you. You are on your own. And you wonder to yourself, will I ever be able to finish this game? The ducts are the first labyrinth type area you come across, and you don't need to make a map, but you probably should. The issue with that, however, is the fact that it's difficult to take your time to map by hand while there are several enemies about, and running into one will surely send you all the way back to where you first got your gun, while also draining your battery. Through the power of caveman rage, you do come across another gun, but it is somehow worse than the first. I could be wrong, but it charges up slower than the first gun, and it only has 2 shots before you need to head back to the charging station. I just had the hardest time with this section. I was practically camping out near the charging station, firing and missing 2 shots because I'm dumb, and charging my gun back up. Rinse and repeat. Participating in guerrilla warfare in the same spot for 20 minutes before I killed just one of the enemies. I'm definitely not a bad gamer. Quite the opposite, actually. I would consider myself a pro gamer, with a capital P and a 0 instead of the O. I blame the conveyor belt. It's been out to get me since day one. But this kind of scenario reoccurs throughout the entire game. These complicated systems of corridors make it impossible to just run past the enemy to make it to the exit like in other survival horror games. You don't know where the exit is, and trying to find it without killing anything will only get you killed instead. It has a very outsider feel to it. Although it's in the same genre as Resident Evil, Silent Hill, fucking Dino Crisis, I wouldn't lump it together with those titles. I don't know, it's hard to explain. Once it was finally over and I finished off all the enemies in the ducts, it was time to move on to the next area, which happened to lead us to Kimberly, the first living person we meet face to face. You do a little chit-chatting and catching up before actually figuring out what y'all should do next, settling on trying to contact the other crewmates. Eventually getting a hold of David, Laura's boyfriend? Husband? Significant other? Partner. Now, I don't know if his voice actor made him sound strange as fuck on purpose or if he was just bad. I couldn't even focus on whatever the hell he was talking about because it was just so distracting. Kim's actor, on the other hand, had a pretty decent performance compared to all the other voice actors in the game. It does help that her character has more to work with. With the death of Kim's Boothang Parker being revealed to her because we already know about it, you feel the grief that she is feeling, and then soon after, the anger stemming from the fact that Laura is trying to comfort her, but Kim feels as though Laura could never relate. She could never understand what it's like because her British bae is still alive. It's not Oscar-worthy acting, but it's certainly better than most video game VAs during this time. The CGI still wanders off into the uncanny valley, but Kim's actor keeps things feeling grounded. at least just for that character. After snooping through Kim's computer for a bit, Kim calms back down and returns. Instead of being down in the dumps, Kim decides it's better to do something about it. In the words of Frankie Valli, "Big girls don't cry." As the two set out, she talks about avenging her husband and killing babies. I will not elaborate. Soon after, changing subjects to a fond memory she had with Parker, it's very emotional, but definitely a red flag if I've ever seen one. I could see where this was going from a mile away, but deep down, I was hoping it wouldn't. I like Kimberly. She's probably the only character in this game I like. Unfortunately, no matter how much I liked her, they still did her dirty, and she got.
So it's you. You killed him, didn't you? Where are you?
Damn. The one person you finally come across is DED dead. And gone like the old Justin Timberlake in a matter of mere minutes. The only thing you can do is move on. On Disc 1, although we did get some character-driven moments towards the end with Kimberly's brief and devastating appearance, for the most part it was action-packed with a little bit of adventure stuff and story, mostly spending your time alone away from the other characters. On Disc 2, we get a bit of a shift. You're getting a whole lot of puzzles, a whole lot of cutscenes, and not a whole lot of enemies. At the beginning, you are greeted with the Summer Towers elevator, which serves as its own puzzle. Instead of having normal buttons, ones that would make traversing the tower's many floors simple, the elevator has 3 switches, each with their own set value. Different combinations of switch positions determine the floor you will go to. It's a simple enough puzzle to where you can figure everything out with trial and error, but the only problem with that is that every time you go to a different floor, the game plays a very long and unskippable cutscene. I was okay with it the first time it happened. The second time and onward made me want to pull out my hair, so there's that. Once you get the hang of how the elevator works, Laura meets up with the last surviving crewmates, George and David. David, as we know from earlier, is Laura's boyfriend or something. He also works in the space station, I guess. He's a little strange, and I get weird vibes from him, but again, this could just be because the voice actor is awkward as fuck. Upon seeing each other, Laura and David share a passionate kiss, or as passionate as 2 CGI models could. He mentions an escape pod that they could use to make their way back to Earth so that they can live happily ever after. He also promises to tell her something important later. Very sweet. George, on the other hand, is the most nonchalant motherfucker on the ship. His words say he is worried about me, but his tone says otherwise. And then he kicked me out of his room. He's such a fucking dick. Unrelated, but back in the ducts, George actually has a room you can go into which has one of his many computers, because he is the ship's programmer, and what is a programmer without their computers? This one is locked by face recognition for some reason. And when I saw it, I was thinking, George has got to have some gnarly space porn on this thing if he refuses to put the emoji lock on this like normal people. Attitude aside, he did say something that piqued my interest.
Laura, when you have a problem, come directly to me first. There is only one person who understands you, and that is me.
What's that supposed to mean? And I thought to myself, are they really about to do what I think they're about to do? After spending who knows how long looking for George, going up and down that torturous elevator, we finally find him in the basement storage room, accompanied by pools of blood. I can't believe it. David, my ride or die, is dying. And he's a Robo-Man. This is the most emotional scene in the game. Now, I didn't cry because I'm a grown man, but I wanted to. Just when we think there couldn't be anything sadder than Kimberly's death, this scene hits you like a brick. David's once disjointed and awkward voice acting suddenly feels right when he's on the verge of mechanical death. And Laura is really selling this performance. No lines, just pure pain and sorrow. You feel that shit. With Michael Nyman's, I'm going with Nyman's melancholic piano piece in the background, the whole scene really comes together. Going into Enemy Zero, I would have never expected to get a scene so emotionally impactful. I mean, even if it's pretty much just an Alien ripoff, a moment like this makes me wish this game was a movie instead, but like still keep it 90s cheesy CGI. Good scene, 10 out of 10, love it. Thinking back to what George said about knowing me more than anyone else, my dumbass jumped to the conclusion that George programmed David so that he could get with me as a British lad instead of doing it himself. It's like Avatar, right? David is George's blue person and I'm his blue lady wife. And all this just so he could have blue alien hair sex with me. You then confront George about David immediately after he saves your ass, and he refuses to explain shit, which in my defense fed into my kinky Avatar theory. Eventually, Laura ends up scanning her body and finding out that not only did that alien implant an alien baby into her throat via Gok Gok, but Laura herself is also an android, which kinda ruined my theory and made George seem a little less creepy, and in turn made me slightly less interested in the story. So what was really going down was that George was just playing Barbie and Ken with us. George programmed Laura with human memories and the knowledge that she would need to complete the mission on Aki, but he went a little overboard and she ended up forgetting that she was an android, this whole time believing that she was a human like everybody else on the ship. Well, except for the pile of blood and wires over there. George tries to reprogram Laura, now of all times, and that goes as well as you would imagine. I'm not gonna say he got what he deserved, but know that I'm thinking it. Now Laura is truly alone. Everyone else in the space station is dead, and Laura's only hope is to make it to the escape pod. That is, if she can get there alive. The final act of Enemy Zero has got to be my least favorite, as it is the complete opposite of the previous one. Rather than being filled to the brim with cutscenes, puzzles, and story, Disc 3 is more of a trial to test your patience with the gameplay, and oh my fucking god, I hate it so much. So basically, how this works is that the fall tower of the Aki is made up of several floors of labyrinths. You would think that you were playing a mystery dungeon game with how many there are. The first 2 floors can be quickly ran through, assuming you get lucky because no one has the time to map out everything as they go. Afterwards, you make it to a rest area, where Laura will cry over her dead Roomba for a minute and find the best gun in the game. It has unlimited charges, so there's no need to run back and forth to a charging station. Though it's not like one exists from this point on, but you know. And it also has a quick shot that can be spammed, which will prove helpful in the next floors of the tower. Welcome to the Piss Tunnels. For the first time in Enemy Zero, we are introduced to a new type of enemy. They are little baby men that crawl on the ground and make disgusting noises when nearby, not unlike human babies. Now they are visible to the naked eye, and one quick shot will easily take them down if you're close enough, but they don't set off your VPS, so you can hear when they're around, but you can't tell which direction they're coming from. This sucks because it means you either have to sit and wait with your back turned to the wall so that they can't sneak up behind you, or you cannot be a wuss and risk one coming around a corner right as you pass, giving you a game over. I don't like it. Not one bit. Just when you think the piss tunnels are bad enough with the baby alien boys, the shit turns green and now you have to deal with the babies and the regular invisible aliens at the same time. Now, don't make the same mistake I did, believing that the quickshot would do anything to the invisible enemies, because that is too good to be true. I'll have you know, I only cried twice while playing through these floors over and over again. Each time, my voice recorder battery draining, threatening to clear my save data if I don't stop sucking at this game. And that's what makes Enemy Zero scary, not the aliens themselves. Anyways, if you somehow manage to make your way through those floors, you will find yourself in the slime dimension. It's a nice change of scenery, but ultimately it's the same as before. It does end with a sort of open spaced area, where I spent 30 minutes clearing out all the aliens because I was afraid of being sent all the way back to the piss tunnels, hanging out in the ducts, randomly shooting until something decided to run into my line of fire. Hey man, it's okay to cheese if they were cheesing first. Don't hate the player, hate the game. After all your blood, sweat, and tears went into not dying, you finally make it to the game's final boss, still without a save area in sight. Being extra cautious of the unknown beast up ahead, for it very well may send you back to the piss tunnels, where you are destined to spend the rest of your days. That was it? Okay. I don't know how I feel about this. On one hand, I would want the final boss to not be easier to kill than literally any other enemy in the game, but on the other hand, if they did make it an actual fight, I probably would have had to play through the whole tower over and over again for eternity. So, I guess it's okay. In other news, Kimberly's alive, and reveals to us that she knew that the point of our mission was to capture those aliens and bring them back to Earth in order to use them as biological weapons. Resident Evil type beat. She lets Laura know that she wants her to go back to Earth and become a real human, and that she will stay back, as her place is with Parker, her deceased husband. You chase her all the way back to Parker's room, only to find that you are seconds too late. Kim Julieted herself. Cue the depressing music. Cue Laura's gut-wrenching sobs. Good job, Enemy Zero. You have made me cry over a character's death twice. R.I.P. Kimberly. You were a real one. Laura gets her shit together after a bit and heads out towards the escape pod. On the way, her VPS dies. There are enemies all around and no way to navigate safely through this final labyrinth. For a moment, all hope is lost. Not only for Laura, but for me too, because I'm sure as hell not bothering to try and make it through without my beepy beeps. Luckily, we hear the voice of David for some reason. I guess he's supposed to be speaking to us from beyond the grave, some sort of supernatural phenomenon, a miracle, if you will. I choose to believe that Laura is schizophrenic, but hey, whatever gets us to that pod. At every crossroad, David will tell you which way to go in his best ghost voice, though he will eventually lead you towards an enemy. You would think that him saying there's an enemy right in front of you means pull out your gun and start shooting, but no, I wasted 3 loads trying to kill the enemy only to realize it doesn't work and that you want to turn around and David will try a different route. So why not just say turn around or maybe run away? Why confuse me like that and force me to waste my battery? That's not very cash money, David. After following all of David's directions, you finally get to the escape pod and are on your way back to Earth. Also, Laura doesn't have any nipples. That's not super important information, but I thought I should mention it. It's weird. So I have mixed feelings towards Enemy Zero. On one hand, it has a lot of things going for it. Michael Nyman really put his whole bussy in the soundtrack for this game. There's a lot of somber piano pieces that aren't exactly spooky, but are certainly unsettling. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have dynamic, modern classical cuts with grand sweeping strings. The song Aspects of Love is definitely a highlight of the OST. That shit is just so beautiful. Malfunction is not as beautiful, but just as great, opting for a more tense and chilling vibe. There's just a lot of good music here, except for maybe the track Confusion. I mean, it's good, but I really don't like how farty the brass sounds in it. It's really distracting. The game's atmosphere is nice too. I mean, with horror in space, you really can only go with cold and silent, so it's not like Warp was doing anything special here. It's just what a game like this calls for. But I mean, it's effective. It does what it needs to do, and that's all I can really ask for. But what really holds this game back is the double-edged sword that is the gameplay. It is so unique and innovative. After 20-something years, there still isn't another game like this. I love that. On paper. But when it comes down to actually playing the game, that's where I start having second thoughts. I feel as though Enemy Zero is just a little too frustrating and stressful, too slow, too tedious, and I don't believe that's what many people are looking for in a game. From what I've heard, the PC version that I played is actually baby mode, and the original Saturn version is more restricting when it comes to saving and gun charges. So I don't think I would have been able to finish it if I played that one instead. It's a cool game. Overall, I've enjoyed my time with it, but I can't say it is a game I would recommend to anyone, and certainly not one I would ever come back to. But hey, if it looks like it's up your alley and you have the patience, go ahead and give it a whirl. I had fun, some of the time.